the constraint led approach is basically I'd say something that sports coaches, anyone of any sport listening to this, it's a way and practical approach to coaching based on the ideas of ecological dynamics. So firstly, I'll explain what ecological dynamics is. So essentially it comes from dynamic systems theory and ecological psychology. So these are two kind of different worlds. A lot of this work was done in the 1960s. So dynamic systems theory, heavily pioneered by Nikolai Bernstein. He was a Soviet scientist, and he basically came up with the term degrees of freedom, and actually looking at how the human body actually moves. And he's famous for coining the phrase repetition without repetition. He did a pioneering study looking at all the blacksmiths in the Soviet Union. And the idea was that the Soviet Union thought that blacksmiths, the most skilled blacksmiths, would have the exact technique every time, and they wanted more efficiency. So that's why they commissioned this study. And he realized that it was actually impossible to reproduce the same movement every time, even in a very closed environment like a blacksmith striking an anvil. And he saw the most skilled blacksmiths had different variations, but they'd strike the same part of the anvil with their chisel every time, but different ways. So obviously, this has many implications for sport, because we understand that to actually physically reproduce the exact same technique over and over again is impossible. But the problem with the traditional approach is that's exactly what it's drilling into kids, that there's only one way to do something, and they're trying to basically do it the same way every time, even though when they play in an actual 7-on-7 soccer, 5-on-5 basketball, 11-on-11 rugby, it doesn't work like that. So that's essentially dynamic systems theory, looking at degrees of freedom, how the body moves, and understanding that it's not a linear process. The body self-organizes and movements appear as a result of various different constraints. Then the ecological psychology part, a lot of this work comes from James Gibson. And essentially some key things here is the nature of perception action coupling. So this is a continuous kind of process in terms of players in any sport, even in day-to-day life, walk down the street, buy a coffee or whatever, we're perceiving information in our environment and then acting upon it, right? And it's a continuous process. And another key part of this is the idea of an affordance. And in ecological psychology, an affordance is simply an opportunity for action.